Alright everybody, it's officially 2022, aka 2020 Ascension Level 2. It means fewer resources, more dangers, and maybe possible zombie attacks. But as we are looking forward, for today's critical thought, I want to talk about two trends that I've seen from the indie game space. One that seems to be making development better for indie devs, and one not so much. I've been covering the indie space now for almost a decade, and I've had a chance to interview a lot of developers and continue to do that to this day. And when I started covering indie games and talking to developers, there was a sense from the indie community that the game that you are making is it. This is your one and done, your complete magnum opus, this massive game that you are going to put anything and everything that you can think of into this title. Because again, when we look at kind of the early indie dev scene in the 2010s, probably early to maybe 2013, 2014, that was pretty much your way of proving that you deserve money. And we saw a lot of games come out that were very unique designs. They were usually supported for many months or years. And whenever I interview developers of these games, I always ask them, was there anything else that you wanted to include in this game? Was anything left on the cutting room floor at the end of the day? And most of them said no, that this was their game. This is a game that it didn't matter if it took months, if it took years to make. This is it. This is my experiment. Once it's done, I never want to look at this kind of concept or this design ever again. And this kind of led to a lot of kind of what would become like the first major successes, such as Clay Entertainment, who had this practice of going all in on each one of their designs and then switching to some other unique concept for the next one. Project Moon with Library of Ruina, Limbic Corporation, and of course Lobotomy Corporation are probably more and the more modern examples of this. But when you go all in like this, it also adds to the risks that come with game development. That if you're spending 3, 5, 7, 10 years on a single game, you have no idea what the market is going to be like. Hell, we don't know what the market's going to be like in 2 months from now. And for developers who have been breaking in over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen this very subtle change in terms of how games are being developed and released. And that is focusing more on streamlining as opposed to the magnum opus. That it's better to do one thing super amazingly, positively well, rather than try to fit 5 or 6 different concepts in. And this is something that I've spoken about when it comes to level design, that a level should only be as long as it needs to be to get its point across. It's better for a level to have one core concept than be a massive 5, 10 different kinds of things you're doing in that space. Because it's better to focus not only on a level design, but on a game's development. And what we've been seeing over the last few years have been developers who have been doing just that. That their games aren't meant to be 50 to 100 hour long experiences. They're not meant to do every single idea the developer wants. They're meant to do one thing. Whether that is a high-speed action of Unsighted, the web swinging of Webbed, the card-based mystery of Inscription, and I'm sure we can think of many other examples of this. By the time you're watching this video, either my interview with the Prodigal developers from Color Grave will either be up or coming up. But in that interview, one of the things that stood out to me was when they had a lot more ideas and concepts for this game, that about, I think, like a year into development, they just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. Let's get rid of this. Let's focus and streamline it down. And the version that we've played of Prodigal is stronger all for it. that, again, it's better to have 5 things done perfectly in your game than try and make that 30, 50, 80 things, all trying to vie for the consumer's attention, and of course cost you time and energy and money in order to do. And what this means from kind of a development standpoint, even from a marketing standpoint, is that it allows developers to really hone in on what their game is supposed to be, which in turn makes it very easier to market that game. If you're trying to make a high speed or very movement based first person shooter like Ultra Kill, well, that's what that game is. You're not trying to compete with the visual novel grand strategy audience. Likewise, if you're working on an RPG, you know you're not going to be catering towards super high speed Devil May Cry fans. And it's better, again, to make your game as streamlined as possible. Now, with that said, it's definitely brought a discussion when it comes to pricing. And again, pricing is an evergreen topic. We'll be debating this long after, when we're up to Ascension 15 of 2020. But what we've seen from games over the last 2 to 3 years has been trying to focus on quality. And that has also meant raising the price. Again, 5 to 7 years ago, most games were being released at $9.99, $4.99. The whole race to the bottom was in effect. But over the last 2 to 3 years, thanks to games like Disco Elysium, Celeste, Hades, and a lot of other standout indie games, the minimum price has grown. We're now sitting at about, we could say low end $14.99 and maybe a high in most cases of $24.99. And we've also seen games at $19.99 as well. But the point about this is that people are willing to pay more if it means getting a higher quality experience. The days that you could sell someone on a 99-cent game that has 500 hours of somebody just drawing lines across a screen is not going to work anymore. If you can deliver a fantastic, phenomenal, never before seen in this capacity game that's 2 hours long, well, you have an amazing, never before seen game that's under or at 2 hours that people are willing to buy. And the market, I think, has really responded with looking for quality. And the independent space has kind of grown to match that expectation. Again, if we look at some of the games that we've played on the indie spotlights, as well as the games that make up my top 10 lists, that they are all fantastic games that have very unique original concepts. Are they meant to be 50 to 100 hours long? No. And they don't have to be. This is something that I've spoken with Chris Park about on several occasions with how he changed his approach with Ark games. That originally his games were these massive experiences, that he would in a way over-design them. And for the people who played them, all the way through, they certainly got their money's worth and beyond. For a lot of people, however, they stopped for one reason or another, and a lot of that content just ended up being a waste in that respect. So what he shifted to doing was look at his games as essentially these different systems. What's the core gameplay loop? What must be in this game version 1.0? Okay? What doesn't need to be in this game? What doesn't supplement or is required by the core gameplay loop? We'll save that for expansion content and if the market demands it. And what we've seen again with even games like Dyson Sphere Program and Gunfire Reborn is that a game that is designed around a singular concept taken as far as you can reasonably go. If it doesn't work, we'll move on to the next idea. If it does work, how do we grow that from there and keep that momentum going? As opposed to just saying, okay, we're going to start up here and we're going to focus our attention. And Maybe it will work, maybe it won't. Who knows? And this is, again, a really great thing for indie developers. But there's a part 2 to our video today. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about a not so positive trend that I'm seeing indie developers do, even those who should know better than to do this. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. No video footage to go with this part for today, because we're in kind of, tough love mode here. But in the last part, I talked about how developers are streamlining their developments and making smaller games that are more focused compared to trying to fit everything in, and that's good. But a more alarming trend that I've been seeing lately from indie developers has been a kind of soft release. And this is something, again, that we've kind of seen out of the rise of early access. Release a game in an unfinished state, get people interested in it, and continue working and iterating on the concept all the way to 1.0. And that in itself has been mostly a positive trend. It's afforded developers a chance to get very early feedback and improve games before the actual launch. The problem with that came when developers went too early, or released a game that had so many problems on day one that were never truly looked at or dealt with when it went to 1.0. But something that I've been seeing developers doing lately has been releasing a game at 1.0 and still needing to correct issues with it. And I'm not talking again about finding a bug 10, 20, 30 hours in. I'm talking about pain points and systemic issues that we can see within 30 seconds of playing. And the reason why there's no game footage here is that I'm not going to show any to name names. But there's been this annoying trend of a game being released in 1.0. There are noticeable issues, and I mean these are issues that developers actually point out within 24 to 40 hours of the game being released, and then they're corrected within about a week or two. Or in some cases, the game is launched and there are literally missing features that the game promotes in the game that aren't in there, and developers say that it will come eventually, sometimes taking 1 to 2 months after its release. And this is something that is a very big no-no. 1.0 is a very big deal for your game. It's something that, again, we've talked about before with the actual concept of going from early access to 1.0. This is supposed to be your game at its absolute best and most refined. This is what the market is going to judge your game on. If 1.0 of your title is bad, you are burning a lot of goodwill for day one, week one, even month one that you may never get back. And like I said a minute ago, some of these issues that we're seeing, this is not stuff that is hard to find. This is basically 10 minutes of playtesting a game and finding issues, be it from camera controls to general bugs to even just quality of life and UX issues. And this is the kind of stuff that you should never be leaving in your game, intentionally or not. Again, if you want to expand your game with more missions, with more content down the road, more power to you. But 1.0 is the time to release a finished, stable, and self-contained product. And I'm seeing developers, again, who aren't following that lesson. And when you mess up like this, part of the problem that comes with it, I believe, is the echo chamber effect. The developer is only listening or only is getting feedback from their most hardened supporters. The ones who don't care if, jumping doesn't feel right or if the UI is a little hard to read. And again, that's something else that we have spoken many times prior about the dangers of only having that echo chamber. And when I see these games being released in this state, it annoys me because the developers should know better than this. And when you are squandering that first week or two of sales and impressions, that will come back to bite you. Because for a lot of people, especially those who cover games, they're not looking at your game after 7 patches or a year's worth of content. They're going to remember that very first experience, day 1, week 1 of your game, and they're maybe not going to want to come back to it. This is one of the things I talked about in my next book when it comes to free-to-play and live service games, that any mobile or live service game worth its salt, or worth its weight I should say, it has to have its onboarding and essentially all 3 phases of its design fully sketched out day 1. If your onboarding is terrible in your game on its first release, you're going to lose a lot of people. And it doesn't matter, again, if everything else is better. If, again, the first hour to 2 hours of your game is just a unpleasant or frustrating experience. And, again, I guess the moral of this part of the video is, again, playtesting, playtesting, and playtesting. You do not want to release a game with noticeable and issues that are already known in it. Now, again, when it comes to grading what needs to be fixed and what can be held off, what I'm talking about, these are UI UX issues. These are very noticeable issues that you're going to spot within minutes of playing. If there's a bug that only happens 2% of the time 40 hours into your game, okay. It's important to note that you should get that fixed on day 1, but it's not do or die. If somebody starts the game and the camera literally doesn't work right, or your entire game is hitching every time somebody tries to jump, something like that needs to get fixed right away. And it is better, in a lot of cases, to delay a game if you fully well know that there are issues, systemic or not, in your title, rather than releasing it and then saying, we're going to fix this, a week from now, a month from now, 2 days from now. And very big example of this was when Magica first came out, that the original version was so bad, developers did, I think, was like 2 weeks of daily patches to improve that game. And it worked for them, but they still lost a lot of goodwill and a lot of trust in their consumer base because of it. And in today's market, when there are more games than there are people, I think, or consumers to play, we have enough choices that if your game is bad day 1, I can go to the other 100, or in my case, 1,000 games that I haven't played yet. So, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad for today's critical thought. Things are moving better in terms of streamlining games, but you don't want to streamline them too much. So, with that said, thank you for tuning in. As always, do all the liking and subscribing. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. If you have an idea for a future critical thought, let me know. And come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.